Welcome to episode 10 of the Mindedness Revolution. And I'm here with my partner in arms. It's Dr. Baron Short. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Great to see you, Greg. Happy to be here.
Well, it's lovely to be back in our little mindedness adventure, where we've been reflecting on the components of Mind 4, a meta cognitive observer to look at the self, a meta systemic view in relation. And today we're going to add a third pillar of meta reflection today on attention, as I understand it.
That's right. That's right. So, want to jump in there. So if we think about the maps of mind, mind 1, 2, and 3, which we've talked about in other episodes, in many ways, the meta cognitive and meta systemic are working on the justifications and frameworks and schemas at a mind 3. And meta attention, I would say, goes a little further down the stack, right?
Lovely.
Of going into attentional schemas and how attention works. Um, um,
Perfect.
no,
Right. So,
many of your folks are familiar with relevance realization, the idea that the organism has the capacity to this near infinite amount of information coming in of like what to actually pay attention to and how to
right.
rapidly update it. And I would actually argue we're getting hijacked left and right, right? All the way from this beautiful thing called a phone or a computer to
Well,
our own
seems to be pretty
justifications.
prominent, right? Exactly.
Yes, right. So, so that from a very basic how to work on meta attention, it would be we're going to do some practices and stuff, but one would be what's my digital hygiene, right? When do I pick this thing up and when do I put it away? The other is like our own thoughts, right? And so there's the capacity to evaluate thought and justifications. There's which we can do at a metacognitive level. Then there's also the leap to actually say, I'm just not going to give them so much salience. I'm not going to
Good.
give my thought so much attention. And I would argue, I found this in my own life personally, that as you're cultivating these perhaps higher order levels of mind with metacognition and metasystemic, you need a way to regroup and reground
Totally.
back in the core experiential
Yep.
embodied self, right? And if
Love
you
it.
can't do that, you're going to do things to try to get to do that. So you might as well just go directly into that and
Totally.
learn how to cultivate these. So
Yeah,
we were
let me
talking
just
about,
I'll just
yeah, go for it.
double click on that real fast. So right, the what we focused on, so this Mind 4 can be thought of as like an, kind of like a sage, almost a view, sort of like is a standard adult egoic persona, and then hey, can we reflect on that? To know okay, how does that, and whatever that is, we're just creating some, and now we're looking at well, how do you justify? You think about how do you narrate yourself, how do you narrate your persona, or how do you hold your experiential self? That's one. That's pretty up here in the ego, and then this whole meta systemic thing is pretty analytic. But now
Mhm.
what we're doing in these last two is getting into this Mind 2. Both what does it pay attention to, like how does it focus, and then how does it grip, and then what comes up on the screen of awareness will be our next one. So really, that's I love the architecture. This is sage modes and looking. Okay, what's the structure of the systems you're in, and how you justify, and sort of the psychotherapy world, and then really the Eastern traditions really have been have an enormous amount of wisdom to afford us. And speaking as somebody sort of in the West and didn't have your background, I learned about
Mhm.
this late in the game for a clinical psychologist, this mindfulness kind of thing, and then open up. So it's really I love the way this sort of oh yeah, let's get embedded and embodied, and get in touch with our primate and be able to connect to it a Mind 4 into our Mind 2 kind of structure.
Yes. Yeah. Love it, Greg. Yeah. And just from a ideographic historic view, like I was early influenced by folks that were doing meta attentive and meta aware practices. There was a guy by the name of Hal French who was a religious studies professor at the University of South Carolina, where I went to. And I was at a deep existential, which we've talked about, deep existential place. And this guy had the twinkle in his eye. And I'm like, what does he have? Because I definitely want that, right? Like whatever he's doing, this guy was so full of presence and love and engagement with the world. And I figured that wouldn't hurt, like to be a little more like that, right?
I think
So
you achieved that, man. When I
yeah,
met you, I
yeah.
was like, I think that guy's got a twinkle. So good job.
Thank you, thank you. And yeah, so that would be that kind of the closer personal relationship. I've certainly been influenced by a variety of other East and Western meditation teachers and Mind and Life Institute and hanging out with John Kabat-Zinn, doing yoga and mindfulness meditation, doing retreats with Alan Wallace, who's more in Tibetan Buddhism. Um, Depending on time, did a retreat with a device before we had it as a commercial product where we were that we now call Zendo
Right.
meditation, but on an e-meditation at that time we called it e-meditation retreat, and learning more from a very secular or trying to be more secular of a type of attentional mindfulness that Shinzen brought up in some certain
Mm-hmm.
elements. So certainly been influenced by these folks, and I think ideally people are learning to find what works for them rather than saying there's one way to do this and one.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like you got to find at this point what works for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
we would say that to our audience, um, uh, that we're going to talk about some practices that may or may not work for you, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like you find what
Mm-hmm.
works for you.
Right.
Um, I would mention before we kind of go into the practice, what might be, we were talking about last episode, what might be a superpower of
Mm.
meta attention, right?
Good. Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think about kind of four capacities. There's a focus, so
Okay.
learning to focus, learning
Mm-hmm.
to put your attention where you want beyond like the 10 seconds that our
Right.
digital social media will try to make us do, or 3 seconds. Um, as you learn to focus and able to put attention where you quote, choose, there's a type of flow that occurs, and that
Mm.
can be
Nice.
quite powerful. It can be A, pleasant, B, you can feel quite confident, and C, it enhances your performance in whatever you're doing, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
you're in this flow
Mm-hmm.
state, Sixten Mahai talked about
Mm-hmm.
flow,
Mm-hmm.
and who's a psychologist who studied all that, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um, then also just this the third one would be embodying, which talked about earlier, embodying the experiential core self. So like
Mm-hmm.
actually recognizing this identity schema within you,
Mm-hmm.
at a lower level, lower plane of your own mental mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fairly important. And it's a place, and people, I will say, people may find, as they do types of attentive practices or meditation practices, sometimes things come up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Oh
where
yeah.
these things are not either or. You may do
Mm-hmm.
meta attentive practices that
Mm-hmm.
point you, do you need to do some more metacognitive work, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
calm MO
Mm-hmm.
work on yourself
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
psychological material comes up. So focus,
Right.
flow, embodying your experiential self. And then the fourth one that I think gets us closer to the meta attentive is actually the sense of deconstructing and reconstructing your sense of phenomenal experience, that you can
Right.
actually at a higher order level, or like at a very discriminatory level, actually watch the phenomenal matrix deconstruct and reconstruct,
Lovely.
which is a
Lovely.
very interesting thing. So
Let me just I think that's beautiful, and I'll just sort of add this. We'll keep with this flashlight thing. So now, if we dropped into our primate, there's awareness. Okay, that's like what's the light? And now, next time we'll be talk, and then where does this shine? Okay, attention
mm,
very much can be thought about as the hand that's directing the
mm,
flashlight. So it's like, oh, it's over here, it's over here, it's over here. I was like, we're gonna make this become focused. Like, where are we attending to? What are we paying attention to? Where are we shining the flashlight? And then next time we'll be talking about, well, what comes up on the screen of awareness?
mhm.
Where so now we're directing our attention toward the awareness, and you'll see that actually your whole self is so enormously dictated by the direction of where you shine the flashlight. That's one of the great insights. Is like I become what I look at, and in many ways, and now we can become aware of that. This comes naturally to you, but you've been sort of blind to it potentially. That you can become aware of where you pay attention and how you pay attention, for sure.
That's awesome, Greg. Yeah, I love the metaphor of the hand on holding the light. Yes, that's spot
That's
on.
yeah.
Um, Alan Wallace would talk about it as looking through a telescope. Like if you were going to look at the stars in the sky, and you had a telescope and you were trying to hold it in your hand and you're
Mm.
moving around, things are like fuzzier. And if that's the only way you know to use that telescope, that's how the world is, right?
Ah, lovely.
But if you learn to steady the legs
Ah,
and let it
beautiful.
be
Yep.
still, then you take a look. All of a sudden, things have a much higher resolution, right? And so
Beautiful.
he would apply that metaphor there. Yeah.
That's a wonderful angle on that. I hadn't actually heard that bridge, and
Mhm.
I'll yeah, that attaches nicely for sure.
Mhm. Great. So we're gonna I'm gonna just briefly talk about some components of a type of meta attentive practice.
Okay.
Some of this came out of just hard-won experience. Other parts are what I've learned from other teachers. And then we'll do like a brief, like 5 minute practice of that, maybe talk
Great.
about it and kind of wrap it up. But so what I want to try to do is just um, a type of attentional practice, and saying what are some of the precursors to do that?
Okay.
What are the legs of the
Mm-hmm.
stool so you could just
Mm-hmm.
do the practice?
Mm-hmm.
And so I break them into several things. First would be right effort. And so, ooh, little
Mm-hmm.
thumbs up. So
That's
meaning
right effort.
you want to try, but you don't want to try too hard. You don't want to try so hard that you're making yourself react because you're not achieving whatever you thought you were supposed to achieve.
Right.
That's part of the critic coming in, but
Mm-hmm.
it's this like light, playful effort. I think
Mm-hmm.
that helps like take some of the
Good.
tension off of people trying to
Mm-hmm.
do this.
Mm-hmm.
The second one would be posture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a balance when trying to do the practice. If you're slumped over, you're more likely to go to sleep or get
Mm-hmm.
dull. If you're too tight, then you're going to go up. You're going to go up into thinking, and why am I so tight? And what So the posture of kind of being upright, but allowing the body to be relaxed. The third
Mm-hmm.
one is about breath. So we're going to actually say you can use the breath. For people who've ever scuba dived, they get this if you're at the very bottom of the surface. You can take a breath and make your body rise or fall
Mm-hmm.
just so you're not hitting the ground. It's
Right.
kind of tightening a string just right so that you can
Mm-hmm.
play that tune. And so the breath, you can actually use the breath if you were doing a practice and you found yourself um, too sleepy, you could actually like take a much more, yes, you
Mm-hmm.
could kind of get that more awake alert state. If on the other hand you're too alert and awake or anxious, like taking some
Right.
slow deep breaths. And
Right.
important to say for people who run on the anxious side, not fast deep breath, right? That's how you hyperventilate and give yourself an anxiety attack, right? So this effort, posture, breath, the body itself, the bodily tension or relaxation. So I'm just self-owning, very much in thought. I needed these type of practices to unplug from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if I can get my face and my head and my neck to relax,
Hmm.
then my mind will settle way faster, right? So trying to
Yes.
look at things to help the mind settle faster.
Um,
And then the last one would be about your object of focus and how you deal with distraction, right? So
okay.
you're picking, so a lot of times somebody might do a concentrative practice where they focus, say, on the breath. That's what we're going to
Mm-hmm.
do for this one.
Okay.
But you could also just watch where your mind goes, or
Mm-hmm.
actually say, I want to pay attention to, say,
Mm-hmm.
my mental imagery, or I want to pay attention to what I hear, or I
Mm-hmm.
actually want to just pay attention to thought
Mm-hmm.
without reacting to it. Now that takes some practice to get there, but there are
Totally.
different things. And I don't know if you would mention the four
What?
doors of perception or
Well, actually, I just want to just circle back on. I'm really appreciating the tripod metaphor that
mm,
we're setting up here. Okay, how are we getting our telescope? But what's the right handle so that
yeah.
we can see how we see, hear how we hear, feel how we
Mhm.
feel, and be able to see that as opposed to you know working all around it, right? Or having it flop all around without being able. So I hadn't exactly heard it that way, but as you say that and then set this up, I can feel my body, tightening down my tripod, as it were, and be
That's
prepared
it.
then to attend to attention, and then understand how the skill of attention, the capacity of attention, can be cultivated for that. So that's the first thing. And then what do we generally tend to? Yes, if you want to bring up sort of like, well, we have sort of schema, I think, that are pretty easy to see. In fact, there's empirical evidence that when we ask people, what are you experiencing, thinking about, these four domains emerge pretty readily. And then there's whether debate or there's others or whatever, but these are the four obvious ones. So one is your exterior world. Okay,
Hmm.
so just paying attention to sensation into exterior sensation and perception. Oh, I happen to be looking out and I saw this cup. Okay, or I'm watching TV. Something in the world you're paying attention to. It's called technically exteroception, but the door to the outside world. Your eyes and ears are the big ones for that. And then there's interoception. Oh, I felt butterflies in my stomach. I felt a pain in my leg. I felt hungry. The interoception is like, what's the state of my body? Some things are kind of in between, like your smell and taste are a little bit sort of in between those two, because they sit right on that cusp. And then there's what's flying through your mind. I was imagining a pink elephant. I was
Hmm.
imagining being really successful in my life. Unfortunately, no. You're having, or what are the images of past and
Hmm.
future that you're playing through at the level usually of perception? You're seeing a scene, you're rotating it, you're imagining it, and then finally there's your narrator. The
Hmm.
what we would call your Mind 3A chatter. People
Hmm.
vary. Some people have a pretty quiet ego. A lot of people have a pretty loud ego, but that's this part of you that can talk to yourself, engage in conversation, commentary. Aaron Beck, my mentor, if you want to call him that, talked about the ticker tape, like kind of
Hmm.
like in the stock market. If you ever watch the stocks go by, he thought about that private self talk as a ticker tape. So talking, imaging, feeling inside, feeling outside. Those are the four doors of perception.
Right. In settling our legs on the stool or our hand for the light, that's what the question, what to do with focus and distraction. So you may pick a thing to focus on, like we're going to do breath. Your mind will wander. That's what it's supposed to do. People tend to beat themselves up with the distraction. They don't realize recognizing their mind has wandered is the gift.
Totally.
Ah, it wandered again, and bringing it back. It's the bringing it back that you're strengthening your ability to change your meta attention, right?
Absolutely.
And then to look at these different objects of attention, whether we use the four doors of perception, it's kind of like what works for people. Some people, if they notice the distraction, they may, in Shinjin's language, he would talk about noting or labeling. And so noting would be kind of just mentally noting silently to oneself. Labeling would actually be saying it, like thinking, feeling. You could even say it out loud, right? Vince Horn does a type of social meditation where that's exactly people do. They're like sharing their mind wandering, right? And and Shinzen uses I've talked with you about this, Greg, the see, hear, feel out and the see,
Yep.
hear, feel in, which is
No,
also
that's.
another shorthand way of
Mm-hmm,
like in the moment. So
mm-hmm.
visually seeing, visually hearing,
Totally
the other
that. Yep.
senses,
Yep.
and then the inner hearing, which would be thought,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
the inner feeling of
mm-hmm.
emotion. The outer
Nice.
feeling was of where the body is.
Uh-huh.
And then the
Gotcha.
inner see is the mental imagery, right? Which
Right. That
tends to be
lines
in
up
front of
totally
us.
with the four doors. Totally. Yeah.
Totally
Very
lights up.
nice. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've talked about it enough, but to give people, right effort, posture, breath, and what I'll do is walk us through a practice where we will kind of check into some of that.
Okay. Great.
So I'm going to set a watch
Okay.
timer for about 5 minutes.
All right.
For folks listening, I tend to be one of those people who, when I listen to a podcast, it's at 1.5 or 1.75x. Just
Mm-hmm.
that's how my brain likes to hear it. But think of when you're meditating, it's like fast forwarding through a song. It's
Mm-hmm.
not useful, right? We want to slow it down. And in fact, that's what we have to do in order to see our meta attention, see where we're paying attention. So we're going to slow it down. So people listening or viewing, like take it to 1x and let's just do this together, see what it's like.
That'd
Okay.
be lovely. Yeah. Great.
All right. So first, just kind of getting yourself in that right posture. Remember a little light, playful effort, not too serious. I'm going to try, but not try too hard. Taking a couple of slow, deep breaths, just nice 3 breaths in, And you can do this eyes open or eyes closed,
Okay.
depends on what works for a person. And you kind of settling in, and we're going to use our breath as our area of focus.
Okay.
Some people like to use the nose. Other people might pay attention to their belly or their chest, but just find one of those and play with it, see what kind of
Mhm.
feels right. And so what we're going to use is this ground of just checking in periodically with the posture and the breath, but we're going to mostly focus on the breath, just trying to slow things down a little bit. And we'll do a little body scan to start noticing, paying attention to your face and your head and your neck. It's commonly a place where we carry a lot of tension. As you breathe in, if you notice that tension, and as you breathe out, just allowing those muscles, giving them permission to just soften a little bit, just a little bit. Not trying too hard, but you just letting those muscles soften. And breathing in again, noticing any of those areas of tension in your face or head or neck, letting them soften. And you can kind of scan down to your chest and your belly. As you're breathing in, just kind of noticing the rise and fall of your chest or your belly. Go to your back and your arms, not having to put words to it, but just what they feel like. Not having to judge what they feel like, whether they tingle or hurt, or feel pleasant. All this is fair right now. All good. And feeling where you're grounded in your chair or in your couch, feeling your legs and your calves and your feet, just kind of noticing what they feel like. And kind of scanning back to include the entirety of your body from head to toe, kind of spanning your attention out. And you may notice little tension areas. You can always go into one of those, like if in your face, and just take a breath in and allow it to soften a little bit more. Now, just bringing your attention to the breath, again at the nose or the belly, and just bring your attention there. Not trying too hard, just easy, playful effort. Just the movement of air in and out. Not trying to force your breath to do anything, letting it to settle in its own natural state. And you may notice your mind may wander to a thought or a feeling or something you hear. That's okay. Just gently bringing your attention back to the breath. And I'll let us do that for a little bit, maybe another 30 seconds or so, kind of shut up and let you just experiment with that. And then I'll bring it to a close. And we're going to gently come back, from the breath into the body. If your eyes are closed, just gently opening the eyes back open. Slowly just taking back in the environment we're in. And then just being present to where we are. So that was a very brief practice. Most of the time, we need to find the right amount of time to do this. Too long will make people frustrated. Too short, you may not get some traction going. Some people can't do this as easily at rest. So I know friends that are much more like
Walking,
mindful
maybe.
walkers,
Yeah.
yeah, and like being able to move their body, right? If we're part of that is this embodiment, moving their body and being mindful of that. And so certainly as part of, Western mindfulness, we'll see is that there's an opportunity at any moment to pay attention to what is happening without judgment and allowing
Right.
it to happen. So it's a type of mode that allows us to unplug from overly thinking, being overly embedded in our matrix of justifications, and actually reconnect
Oh,
with this minded animal core
right.
experiential place,
Love
which
it.
has a great value. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, a couple of things that stood out for me. I really liked. I'm not sure if I maybe it said it, but the way you framed the right effort, I like that. That was
Mm-hmm.
a little. The perfect dialectic opponent process. Usually, John Vervaeke loves pointing that out, like being not too hard, not too soft. Right
Mm-hmm.
effort. And the setup, as I mentioned, the tripod setup, that was new to me. And I then just felt that. I felt the architecture to allow my tunnel. Metzinger talked a book before or at least an earlier book. I don't remember exactly he's written, but the ego tunnel, which I
Mm-hmm.
like. And so the attention is shining that, and then I pulled it to my. This time I normally go with my gut, but this time because you mentioned that I was like, oh, I'll hone in on the nose area. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I brought, and I was just conscious of bringing the tunnel, be aware of the tunnel, connected to the tunnel, and of course the mindfulness revolution
Mm-hmm.
in psychotherapy. I mean, we didn't do this much until John Kabat-Zinn. You mentioned him. He certainly is the one of the pioneers, at least raising the issue. And for myself, I had some knowledge of this. Rob Scott, my very dear friend, and sort of has his own angle on this. He sort of introduced me to his angle. It just got a lot clearer, and ever
Yeah.
since the what he calls identity shifting, but it's very similar. This whole process of seeing the lenses, shifting your view about the lenses. And I'll just say that the difference it makes when you know what your attention is
Mm-hmm.
and you know how to grip it and
Mm-hmm.
shine it and know, you know, so when I'm going through a tough time, certainly my attention gets pulled, but I'm just much more aware of the pull, of the shift away at times, of the freedom to basically like, oh, my mind's ruminating here. I can see it. I can let it go, sort of, meaning let it's going to go. It will pull my attention, but I'm just in relationship to the pull. And then I can go meditate for a little while. Or I do like walking. I'm kind of a meditative walker.
Mm-hmm.
Even running, I'll run and I'll just watch the clock, bring my attention to the clock and be structured. So these are all just some of the reflections that I've had in my own life in relationship to this. I'm not an advanced meditator, but have trained the attention and awareness dynamics that you're walking us through. And I appreciate the angle you're bringing, and this is so important for mental health for sure.
Yes, it's huge, right? And it's fascinating. Think of it as much like exercise. You wouldn't say, I'm going to go exercise once, or and that's I'm good for the rest of my life, or you wouldn't get fit, physically fit, and then go, cool, I've done it. I don't ever need to do it again. So I'll quit exercising. So I like to think of these type of practices with meta attention, I also metacognitive and metasystemic, but that this isn't like a one and done thing, or you're not really, you're not getting reaping the benefit. It's more of a meta attention is something that you can cultivate over time and with practice, and it's something you can do at rest. The more you practice this, the more your system, your presumably your Mind 1 system says, "Oh, do
Totally.
that," and goes deep fast, right? So this is
Right.
and and that you can do it at rest, you can do it in motion, you can do it while you're on the elevator, you can do it while you're in the bathroom before you go to your next meeting. Micro, moments of this, right? Just to kind
Uh,
of
I think
retrack.
that's right. I think that's really important. And especially I'll even add a layer of like when it's important, like when life's going really good, maybe okay. Then you're getting flow and the attention is lining up with the stimulus, and I would guess it's a little less. I still think it's very important to have the facility, but man, when you're in the arena, right, and life's wearing you down, the ease which to get out of these habits
Mhm.
when life is really stressful is really high, and then you feel like you don't have the time, so it's kind of a vicious loop. But the fact of the matter is, if we think about it in training, no, that's when you're in attentional awareness COM-MO competition with the world. That's
Mhm.
when the neurotic looping is most likely just to grip you. So you need to
Mhm.
be in the best shape. Then you need to be practicing and running through either in a kind of a therapy or self therapy with the COM-MO in these mindful training of awareness and attention. Those things. So I'll just say that in particular, if life is, if it's holidays, if it's whatever it is that grabs you and has gripped you, then really the training yourself up constitutionally on these angles, I will say as a clinician, that's really very, very important. Don't forget, don't get out of shape on these things, especially when life has you in the arena, as it were.
Spot on, Greg. That's great to remind us and remind our audience of that, so that these are tools of opportunity, right? So that same idea, right? Like holidays are coming up. You brought that up, right? So most people have somebody that gets them triggered one way or another. And it's like, what if I went into it this time? You know, you could call MO it and look at,
Mhm.
what's kind of going on there in terms of the interrelational dynamics. But you also can just go a step down, if you will, and like, I'm going to be present. Can I just look at this and instead of just reacting, or even if I react, like, let's look at the reaction, right? At
Totally.
some point, you're moving yourself into responsivity rather
Right.
than reactivity, right?
Right.
And then that is a transformative moment, right? So
Totally.
it's the same thing that keeps getting your goat, if you will, is an opportunity for transformation where you're like, wow, I met with so and so and I didn't just totally blow my stack, right? That was
Right.
amazing.
Right. Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
And these attentional shifts with practice, you get what Harry Stock Sullivan called therapy a participant observer relation. I mean, he
Mm.
gets involved as a life as a participant on the one level, he maintains as observer. I think the intrapsychic skills of a
Mm.
metacognitive observer becomes a participant observer. So you start to see yourself react, and then you have this sort of friendly awareness voice. Isn't that interesting? You're going to pull what's your attention if you're going to focus on that. What is the isness you're in? What's your justificatory? Why does this activate? And you can hold that space and relate to it.
Mm.
This opens up this potential for responsivity, and by the way, that's going to open up potential for adaptive responding. So don't be normal, be adaptive. How do you do
Be
that?
adaptive.
Well, meta sage mode reflection is going to
That's it.
maximize the likelihood that you'll be able to do that, and being aware of the self, being aware of attention, and being aware of awareness, as we'll talk about next time, is
Yeah.
going to afford you that.
That's beautiful. So that the what we're talking about with meta attention can be very practical and important skill for the 21st century. And you'll learn things that people have known about, by the way, for thousands of years, right? That things are impermanent, your phenomena of your experience, right? You think of a sense of a thought or a feeling, it doesn't stay forever. It's not static or permanent, and it's not independent, right? Your sense of self continues to change, right? Um, and so you start to learn more of the nature of your own phenomena, and so it does become a type of subjective vector of knowledge. Being careful doesn't mean everything I experience is true knowledge. To be careful
Right.
of, but but at the same token, we can learn more about the dynamics of our attention or attention schema, how we pay attention to these four doors of perceptions or what we see, hear, and feel on the inside and out. Um, and cool things can happen, from that process. So
Amen. Amen.
great.
All right. I think that seems like that wraps up this pillar. We've got three pillars in place. Awareness is the final meta one, and we'll be dialoguing about that next time.
Awesome. Thank you,
All right.
Greg.
Thank you, brother. Lovely. I love the architecture coming together. So go out there, cultivate meta awareness, meta attention, meta systemic, meta self, metacognitive stuff, and build the Mind4 perspective. All right.
Here we go.
Take
Let's
care.
do it.
All right.